Christine Holgate never resigned.
The member...
Now, don't tell lies. Are we just going to continue with them screwing the farmers down through the floor? But I ain't spending any time on it.
Don't keep interrupting me. You hear me? Don't keep interrupting me. I have a royal power.
So, Bob, welcome back to another episode of Wisdom Mongrel Patriot. We are here in the belly of the beast in Canberra. There seems to be a huge rise in patriotism and in popularity of patriotism. And today in Parliament, you're going to be asking a question that is related to that, related to immigration and patriotism and what it means to you to be a patriot. And what is actually stemming from you? Why do you feel so passionate about the issue of immigration?
Well, I didn't really. 6 or 7 years ago, I would not know anything about it. But in that time, I go to Sydney and Melbourne, and there is a very large number of people from the Middle East and North Africa. And I specifically say that way because we have a lot to do in the cattle industry with Indonesia. And I find them very much like the Japanese. They're very well-mannered, very intelligent, very honest people. I find them excellent people. The current ambassador is Christian, and the deputy ambassador from Indonesia is Christian. Could you imagine Qatar or Libya having a Christian ambassador? So there's a big difference. But bringing people in from North Africa and the Middle East is absolutely disastrous. And Bondi was the world's most predictable event. And there's going to be other Bondis, unless something is done about it.
So
migration.
You think Bondi was just the tip of the iceberg? What is?
Yeah, definitely tip of the iceberg.
But do you think? I know that you've had a look at immigration statistics, and it appears to be that 92% of immigrants to Australia move to Sydney and Melbourne, and to a much lesser extent Brisbane.
That's the official government figures. 92% going to Melbourne and Sydney, to a lesser extent Brisbane. That's the official government figures, not my figures. And you only have to walk down the streets. And we were in Melbourne and going to a meeting. We worked for a kilometre, Narella and myself. And I said, how many did you count? And she said, 38. How many did you count? I said, 28. I said, how many people do you reckon we passed? 2,000? I didn't have to say, how many did you count? Because I'm pretty certain she would have been counting the Australians. But the other people, they did not speak English as they walked past us, and they were clearly from some foreign countries. So if on a Friday night at 7 o'clock in Melbourne, the streets are full up with people that are not Australians, they've migrated to this country, and they clearly come from countries that are not the countries that most Australians came from.
Yep.
But worse still, a lot of them from the Middle East and North Africa. And look, I'm sure there's some good people in the Middle East and North Africa, but I'm sorry, I don't want those people to come here.
So I think the point that you're getting across is not all migrants are created equal. There are some migrants that come to Australia, desperately want the opportunities that Australia provides, desperately want to integrate, be part of our culture, bring with them some great traditions and great attributes to Australia.
And enrich Australia.
But there are some that go directly into, I don't know, for want of a better term, ghettos or ethnic enclaves in Sydney and Melbourne where they manifest in their hatred towards Australian society. And
But
that's where it's
just
scary.
no doubt in my mind about that. But because the thing is so flawed now, I'm just lining up and saying, no more migration. Stop. Press the stop button. Start again. We're saying endlessly, and I'll say again on this podcast, no migration without assimilation. So, you ask the question, do you come from a country with democracy? No. Do you come from a country with rule of law? No. Do you come from a country that is Christian? I make no apologies for saying that. No. Do you come from a country with industrial awards? No. Well, what the hell are you bringing them to Australia for? What do you think they're going to suddenly transform?
Yeah.
And, we get a lot of Sikhs in North Queensland, blokes who wear turbans. And I don't know what it is, but they come to Australia and, oh, beauty, I'm an Australian, and they're excited and happy to be Australians.
Yeah.
They come from the Punjab in India, and I don't know why. Well, I do know that their religion is almost identical to Christianity.
And I think that's the point. In Kennedy and throughout all of the regions of Australia, I'd probably argue, we've had brilliant migrant success stories, brilliant stories of a kind of integration with our, not necessarily an assimilation. They might not adopt every value that we've got, but I know that in my local nippers, there are a number of migrants in the schools. The Catholic school, there's a number of Sikhs and a number of other migrants, and they're truly taking a great advantage of the opportunities that we got. But we don't seem to have those opportunities in Sydney and Melbourne. So they come out here, and the opportunities really is welfare dependency.
But there's no industry in Sydney or Melbourne. The motor vehicle industry's gone. The refineries, the petrol refineries are gone. The underwear and garments industry is gone. I mean, the plastics industry is gone. I mean, I can't name an industry that is still there. And so what are they doing? Well, clearly they're doing nothing, and clearly they have to be on unemployment benefits.
Yep. And I think there was, a saying about how we've lowered our expectation, and there needs to be a greater expectation in relation to the migrants that come to our country. There needs to be an expectation of contribution, an expectation of value adding.
Well, just let's not go on with it too long, because we've got to get out there.
Yep.
And scream and yell, and no migration without assimilation. No migration without assimilation. And but the actual figures are over 400,000 student visas. Over 450,000 students come in each year, and on the figures I've been given, only 40,000 are leaving.
Yep. So there's the official migration figures,
and then there's the student
all of the
visa figures
backdoor
and a whole lot of others.
Yes.
But just the immigration figures that they own up to and student visas, we're talking about 900,000 people a year for the last 5 years. So if you want to do the maths, in about 12, 15 years, we'll be a minority in our own country.
And we just...
And they're people that are not, they have no democracy, they have no rule of law, they have no Christianity, they have no industrial awards. I mean, honestly, there is an evil out there. There is an evil out there.
And we just don't have the housing or the infrastructure to be able to support those of numbers.
I don't want to hesitate to pinpoint Penny Wong and Tony Burke. And on the figures, it would seem to me that they're farming these people from the Middle East and North Africa into key electorates in Sydney and Melbourne, which gives them control of the Labor Party and control of the government.
If you were cynical.
Well, I don't even think that. Prime Minister from time to time gives me an impression that he's not really interested in the show. If you got the power, well, you run the bloody thing. Would be. Sometimes he gives me that impression. Well, my own impression is that the show's being run by Tony Burke and Penny Wong. Be the last people in this country that I would put in charge of running the country.
Well, it seemed, that it's an important point, but, we could actually move into reserve resource policy because this is another way in which we can start to put Australia first. And I think the reserve resource policy is putting Australia first in terms of our natural resources. And it seems rather curious that I think it's been, 5 or 6 months since government announced a reserve resource policy, but on gas. But there doesn't seem to be much happening in relation to that.
Let's switch subjects onto reserve resource policy on gas. 4th biggest industrial centre in Australia. Number 1 is Port Kembla. Number 2 is Newcastle, the port, biggest coal port in the world, owned by China, I might add. I mean, fancy the biggest, second biggest industrial centre in Australia, owned by China. I mean, I just can't help but use the word. They are traitors. The people that are running Australia are traitors. The 3rd biggest is Gladstone, one of the biggest aluminium smelters in the world, one of the major coal ports in the world, and also one of the 3 or 4 biggest power stations in Australia. And then the 4th one is Mount Isa. Well, Mount Isa depends for everything on natural gas. We have no coal out there. We're 1,200 kilometres to the nearest coal mine. And so everything's worked on natural gas. Well, that was all right when natural gas was 6 cents a unit. And in our competitor nations in fertiliser, for example, the United States and Russia, I am told that they are getting their gas, and the person that told me is a person that has one of the major phosphate plants, fertiliser plants in America. She also owned a fertiliser plant, or her company did, fertiliser plant in Mount Isa. But she informed me that they were getting it for 6 cents a unit in America and in Russia, and we're paying $16 now.
Yeah.
$16. Needless to say, the fertiliser plant and the copper plant have announced their closure. Now, instead of introducing a reserve resource policy with a price on it, the Queensland government, and I emphasise Queensland government, and I'll tell you why in a moment, they gave $640 million as a gift to the company in Mount Isa, Glencore. They gave a foreign company a gift of $640 million when all they had to do was introduce a reserved resource policy. And where you can't understand what is going on, you're probably looking at corruption, from my experience in politics. Where you can't figure out any logic at all, then the logic that'll be out there will be, party funds being enriched. And maybe private pockets.
So if you strip it back to the nuts and bolts of reserve resource policy, as I understand it, reserve resource is about quarantining a percentage of Australia's natural resources
is kept for Australians.
Australian use, and capping what they can charge for that resource, because it is an Australian resource.
Well, in fairness to the Prime Minister, we spoke to him, pointed out the situation in Mount Isa, and I've got to say that he acted the next day, said we'd probably have to look at a reserve resource policy. When the situation in Mount Isa tightened 3 or 4 weeks later, I spoke to him again, and he announced a reserved resource policy. But we still haven't got a price on the reserved resource policy. I mean, it's been reserved, but we're still being charged $16 a unit.
A price is essential. You need to know that we can affordably, and that will allow the developmentalism, the economic generation that Australia needs to get itself out of this huge black hole that successive governments seem to have created for us.
You know, to me, it is so screamingly simple. Half of Queensland's coal is in the Galilee. All you got to do is open up the Galilee to coal mining. Now, to give you one quick example of that, after 7.5 years, Adani got permission to mine 4 million tonne. They want to mine 25 million tonne, but they got a permit to mine 4 million tonne. But the Galilee, half Australia's coal is in the Galilee. It requires a relay railway line, super cheap, it's just on the ground. You know, the coal trains go down, they come back empty on light rail, costs you nothing, light rail. And we just need a light rail relay line, open up the Galilee, and suddenly the wage structure of Queensland will rise. I mean, a rising tide lifts all boats. And you do that and you build the easy schemes like the tunnel at Cairns. It opens up the vast mineral resources of far north Queensland. And, of course, since all of far north Queensland turned into a national park, that decision has to be reversed. Now, you know, when you say that, let's say there's 4 million square kilometres there. Let's say that. Well, maybe we're going to mine 10 kilometres out of 4 million kilometres. Yep. I mean, honestly, it's so ridiculous. But if you build that tunnel, I would say at least $6,000 million a year you got. If you build a Bradfield scheme and the bridging scheme in Western Australia and the Great Bradfield Canal up to Lake Eyre, if you do those things, there's no doubt in my mind there's not $62,000 million. Now, if you do not deliver the water to owner, operator, farmers, owner-occupier farmers, then no benefit will come to Australia. Yep. It'll just be taken up by big overseas corporations and Australians will get nothing out of it. More importantly than actually doing the water development is how you do it. And owner-operator, owner-occupier. I mean, our cattle stations, we get the balance of power every cattle station. Owner-operator, owner-occupier cattle station gets a freehold title for 200 hectares of irrigation, which will more than double their profits.
So as I understand from your statistics, and you've got a range of developmental economic generating projects throughout Australia, but just, you know, we did a back of an envelope kind of assessment as to the ones that are predominantly in Kennedy or just south of Kennedy in the Galilee and all of that sort of stuff. And we came up with a figure. You could generate the national budget, like, you know, basically make everybody not have to pay tax but still have government earning the same amount of income with you know, I think it was the top 15 projects that we looked at. But there were three essential elements, as I understand
There's a Clarence River diversion in New South Wales, which doubles agricultural production in New South Wales, which is the biggest agricultural state in Australia. And
the three essential elements that I understand it is reserve resource policy to make these developments economic. You need infrastructure to actually allow these developments to go ahead. That's the roads, the rail, the ports.
But really, all you need is that relay line when you open up the Galilee. They'll build their own railway lines into the mines themselves, onto the main line, and you need a relay line. Well, it costs nothing. You do that, you put a tunnel through the range in Cairns to open up all that area, and you built Bradfield and the Clarence River diversion and the bridging scheme in Western Australia, giant irrigation schemes. That's what you've got to do. And it's $300 billion. I mean, the whole of Australia's earnings in a year is $2,000 million. Well, you're just going to inject another $300 billion for very little outlay. Very little outlay.
Yep. And then and the third element, which we haven't really expanded upon too much, but I think you alluded to with the project delays, is the extortionate amount of regulation on economic generating projects, and the way that regulation totally consumes projects to the extent that they actually become unviable, because you've just got years and years and years worth of consultant reports and approval after approval to try and get a project off the ground. It seems that economic generation in Australia has been strangled by regulation.
We badly need a bridge across the Gilbert River. You can't get into the Gulf country without a bridge across the Gilbert River. Probably a tenth of Australia's cattle herd is on the other side of that river. So we need a bridge there. But the bridge, ironically, where it's to go, is only 4 kilometres downstream from a magnificent dam site.
Yep.
So if you build a dam there wide enough to take cars on top of it, 2-lane highway on top of it, which is numerous examples of that in southeast Queensland. They've done it very well. But if you do that, then you'll have at Georgetown a town of 15 or 20,000 people, because you can generate 100 farms off that dam. And also now you've got all-weather access to the Gulf country.
But time and time again, we see that regulation, even when government commits the money for these infrastructure projects, regulation then strangles them to such an extent. We've had a Bruce Highway upgrade, the Gearlock Seymour. That there has been dollars allocated to that, substantial dollars allocated to that since 2021. There has been money allocated, and they're still in the detailed design phase. Now, that floods every year. Every year.
It cuts the national highway.
The national highway is cut. We can't, it costs the banana industry alone, just one agricultural industry, it costs them millions of dollars a day that is cut. It is our only access.
You must understand,
to the south.
people that are watching this podcast, that you cut the bananas off the trees, right? They have a very short shelf life, right? So if you cut them and suddenly the road gets cut, well, you're going to have massive losses.
Yep.
Massive losses.
It's
and that is happening every year now. Every year.
Absolutely. And then if we move on, then you've got the copper string electricity line. Now, I remember when I first started with you back in 2009.
You were still in school then, I know, and you helped us out. Thank you.
Of course. We held a conference, a symposium in Parliament House to talk about the clean energy corridor and the electricity line that was required from Townsville to Mount Isa. That is 17 years ago. 17 years ago. Money was allocated, I think, over 7 years ago for the copper string electricity line. Not one single pylon has gone into the ground.
Not one pylon. You're dead right. Not one pylon. And I saw the head of the authority that's been set up by the government. He's a public service, just public service. And he said, we're going like a house on fire. We're right into the planning stage now. It's up 3.5 years. They're in the planning stage. I had to build a copper string line from Cairns to Corumba. And
this is when you were minister
when I was
back
minister.
in Queensland government?
And we built it in 3.5 years, was completed. Now, there's 3.5 years, and he's skiting about being well into the planning stage.
So we've got
3.5 years. I mean, how much planning does it need to put up a pylon and string copper on top of it?
So we've got 17 years for the electricity line between Townsville and Mount Isa. We've got 5 years for I don't know, about a 200-metre section of the Bruce Highway north of Ingham, and the next one we've got the Hewenden Dam. Now, money was committed towards
Well, as I
HITCO, the
understand,
Hewenden Dam
it's
project.
still committed.
Yeah, that was committed, what, I'd say 4 years ago?
And, you know, they're all excited in Hewenden because the government, after 8 years or whatever it is, the state government has given a water allocation, which is absolutely pitiful and ridiculous. But they're really excited about it because the only thing they've got our state and federal government. No, that's not right. The federal government has committed the 180 million, and it's, as I understand, it's still in an allocation, that 180 million.
So one project, 17 years, another project, 5 years, another project, 5 years. So
Well, I mean, they just won't happen. I mean, you say it's 5 years, but there's nothing happening. I mean, the copper string, for example, there still isn't a pylon.
But how much money has been wasted on bureaucrats moving a pencil from here to there, to here to there? Like,
It was 250 million, I think, was the mooted cost. 250 million has been burnt up and we have not built a pylon. It was 250 million to build the whole scheme, right? But over 3.5 years, we spent 250 million. We're still in the planning stage. You don't plan anything. You just call tenders.
Yep.
And I'll finish on that note. May Jesus, the good Lord's blessings be upon you all.
thank you all.
Sun-scorched land wide and free, red dust rising like a memory.